Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we're discussing my thoughts on episode 12 of the anime series ClassicaLoid. And man, talk about one hell of a trippy episode. Little could I have ever suspected that, Bach-sama would actually come down off that sort of rooftop office of the agency and actually go to Kanai's house and get to know her, kind of have a conversation with her. An actual conversation, like he's actually speaking, like an actual language. He's not just speaking in, musical references and terms and all that kind of stuff. It was mad trippy seeing the way he looks without that sort of wig on. He kind of looks more like a typical aged, but all kinds of kick-ass anime character. It's hilarious to me. It's mind-boggling to me that we see this side of Bach in this episode. And he actually, he has a heartening discussion with Kanai about kind of, he's trying to perceive what it so attracts Beethoven and Mozart and Liz and Chopin, all of them. What so attracts them to living in her abode, in her manor house. And there's a lot of really intriguing discussion about, freedom and what freedom is, what freedom of expression, artistic expression most specifically, what that all means. And, Bach has a very interesting sort of viewpoint on that, which actually comes into play during the end game, for all intents and purposes, battle between Beethoven, Mozart, and Bach, which it's really funny because when Bach actually summons his musique, he kind of like pimps out. He looks like, Elvis meets a classical composer, with the wig and everything, the sunglasses. But I mean, he strikes a couple of poses where it's like, oh, damn, he's like Elvis incarnate here. And he's talking about trying to get eight sounds or particular musical styles, something he's in search of that the ClassicaLoids, I guess they all represent his sort of seeking this thing out. And there's some dialogue from his right-hand woman who really gets the ball rolling for all the events in this episode by calling Beethoven in after his sort of impromptu concert where, he was trying to get the guitar for Sosuke. Sosuke kind of conned him into it. And he subsequently gave it to a street performer. She called him back in effectively, and Mozart just sort of tagged along because it's all about trying to, sort of progress these ClassicaLoids to a certain level, to a certain, pinnacle of their music capabilities. And there's, again, it's somewhat a philosophical discussion about what freedom is, what, freedom of expression is. And Beethoven and Mozart, they're almost like two whiny little brats, as compared to Bach, who is the mature adult. He understands freedom and freedom of expression from a completely different viewpoint. All the things we've seen where Mozart in this episode most especially is calling back on all the times the former version of himself, the original version of Mozart, was, in debt and had to live at the stipend of different employers and had to follow whatever they said and that kind of thing because of the money he owed to make ends meet, to survive. He had to sort of play at the whims of his employers. And so out of that, you would think that Mozart would have, even this incarnation, this ClassicaLoid incarnation, that even he would have a sense of the humility of life and all those hardships. And out of that would be born some sort of artistic expression. And similarly with Beethoven, as we had an episode focused upon him very recently, where this Beethoven is calling back to the original's deafness and how his entire life was changed. The course of his life was shattered. And he could no longer perform. He had to only, yet merely compose because he could no longer hear the sounds. And this was something the real Beethoven, I've actually, been reading a little bit more about the actual Beethoven because he was such a character that fascinated me in life, in history, and his music has always captivated me. And there was a lot I didn't know. And he had actually written sort of a proclamation letter to his two brothers where he had mentioned being suicidal. And it was really his art, his music that saw him not taking his own life, not giving in. And we see this represented in the Beethoven as depicted in this series, who is a ClassicaLoid, a clone, whatever you want to call it, but harkens back to those feelings. And you would think he, touching upon what Bach Sama is, basically trying to implore them, is the actual freedom of expression and expressing your emotions through music. You would think Beethoven, facing those hardships, would understand this incarnation, but they are so youthful, so yet selfish, and they haven't really come into their own. And this is really about making these ClassicaLoids look beyond that sort of juvenile outlook on life and really take to heart, what matters, emotions, all of those things. Music is, the fire that burns deep down within all of our souls. It is a language that bridges all continental and language divides. And it can be something very deeply rooted to the thoughts and feelings and emotions of the person who wrote it, thus making it that much more captivating to the listener, to the one who appreciates the artist's work. And so all of that was like madcap, because of course with Beethoven and Mozart, they're trying to make him like an idol, like a male idol. They're changing up his entire outfit. They basically pulled a con job on him, this promoter who's got a choreographer and a singer or whatever, somebody like a voice trainer or something. I forget what exactly it was, but trying to get Mozart to adhere to the rules of becoming an idol. No more cursing. He's so foul-mouthed, apparently. This guy's like, no, you can't say this, you can't say that. The 7 dirty words that you can't say on TV, as George Carlin would have it. Mozart is breaking all the rules. He doesn't want any part of it, and he's really reminded of that debtor's lifestyle the original Mozart had encountered. And so, of course, just the last nerves of Beethoven and Mozart being broken, Beethoven's subsequently by a group of, smarmy sort of, I guess you could say testy, editors or music type syndicate guys. They want to give Beethoven his big break, and they think it's funny that he took the name, like, oh, you think you're that good? You think you're that badass? You're nothing. Everything like that. You're not taking it seriously. And they both pull out their musique, and of course, all havoc ensues, in the midst of which it's absolutely hilarious. Sosuke is asking Berezuska out, can we exchange emails? Can we, and she blushes. I mean, we already got hints of maybe she feels a little bit, something toward him. So that's cool and interesting and fun. I love that idea. I'm definitely, while I'm not somebody who easily ships characters, I don't really get into that. I'm down for Sosuke and Berezuska, hooking up, whatever. Seems to make him all kinds of insanely happy, so whatever. That face he had toward the end. And this was an episode of expressions. I mean, there's that point when, Sosuke drags Beethoven to this place, and he's talking about, well, Mozart's there too, and he's like, what are you even doing here? You're not supposed to be here, Sosuke. And Sosuke's like, well, Beethoven, I kind of need to handhold him. Maybe I'm his promoter. Maybe I'm his manager, whatever you want to say. I want to make my big break too, even though I'm not supposed to be here. And the look on Beethoven's face when he's saying all this stuff is if, Sosuke's like, forgotten he's sitting right there. The look on his face just made me laugh out loud. I was dying. Subsequently, you have Liz getting a text from Chopin when Bach has gone over to Kanai's house. And, he's tried desperately to reach Sosuke, but Sosuke's all caught up in the moment and doesn't care. So Liz gets the message, her expression, when she realizes, oh, crap, Bach is actually confronting Kanai, the danger they feel this ensues. She immediately runs home and just misses the guy who gets picked up by Chopper, But, I mean, that face just had me dying. And then toward the end, this sort of crazy, I don't want to go so far as to say rape face on Sosuke when he's got her email, but geez, he was drooling and everything and just looked all kinds of distorted. It was insane. That's the whole series in a nutshell. It's insane, but it's beautiful. And I really loved, sort of interspersed when Bach actually is talking to Kanai and he goes up to that organ in the house. For a few brief moments, do we hear his organ arrangement of his toccata and fugue in D minor, which I love. It's one of my favorite all-time classical pieces. You hear it as well when he summons his musique, although they actually do, contemporize it, as they have been doing with a lot of these classical pieces. They sort of interweave the classical arrangements. In this case, you hear the toccata and fugue in D minor, but it's also sort of a pop, maybe pop/rap update contemporization of it. But I mean, hearing that music, hearing the untapped classical music, it reminds me of how much I love that stuff. And I mean, it very much, to equate it, the way I've always felt about it, it does for the ears. Hearing music like that does for the ears what, say, Van Gogh's paintings of the Starry Night or irises does for the eyes. And if you are interested in this kind of classical music, and maybe you don't want to have to go searching out for all kinds of different, pieces where you'll only hear the sounds, if you want good visuals with these classical pieces, I have to highly recommend, because I am a lifelong Disney animated film fan, as well as an anime fan and all that kind of stuff. I have loved animation since I was a wee tot, and for a very long time before I started to focus more on writing, did I think I wanted to become an animator and work for like a company like Disney in that kind of a production of an animated feature film, like all the classics, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, the sort of renaissance of Aladdin, Lion King, Beauty and the Beast. I have to highly recommend Fantasia, because you have a lot of great visuals, and it's not all sort of, kiddie character kookiness like Mickey Mouse and all that stuff. He does feature, but it's all very sort of mature in how the animation coincides with all of this classical music. You have to kind of sit through a couple cutaways from the actual animation whenever they're going from piece to piece, and they have some of these old fart conductors come out and talk about what the next piece is going to be and everything like that. But I mean, this show, I love that the inspiration is a band of classical composers whose music has stood the test of time and then some. And here we are hearing different updated, contemporized, sort of arrangements of them, but you're still getting the gist of what that original music sounded like. And if I can point anyone in the direction of the actual classical music that these songs are based on, I will be satisfied. And I hope this show has done for, its viewers, for those sticking with it, has opened their eyes to all this beautiful music from ages past that can be insanely awesome. One of my favorite Beethoven pieces, speaking of Beethoven, is his Pathétique particular song. There's a whole long name for it, and I'm not really good with all of the actual technical names and everything like that, the instruments and, all that kind of stuff that goes into the names for these things. But look up Pathétique. I think it's movement 2 or something like that. And it's one of my favorite sort of roller coaster rides of music, and I love that we have a series focusing on these characters, and we can hear snippets of some of their most known and well-known pieces and renowned pieces, and to have this crazy story about these ClassicaLoids who are seemingly clones. They were born into this world, again, hearkening back to reminding me very much of Final Fantasy VII, with Cloud Strife and Sephiroth and the whole cloning thing about that, and mixed memories and whatever like that. I mean, it harkens to that. And here we see Bach actually has some kind of goal, and I'm really wondering if it harkens back to some of my earliest speculations in his seeking these 8 sounds, these 8 specific sounds. Does it have to do with ruling the world through music? Like aligning these 8 unique and distinctive musical sounds or tones or anomalies that will sort of brainwash humanity? Does he have a really nefarious sort of goal, or is it something more humanitarian? Is it something more peaceful? Is it about spreading peace across the world? Because music is such an untapped universal language. I don't know, but it really has it called into question with all of his actions, especially in this episode. As I say, Liz was terrified, Chopin was terrified that he showed up on Kanai's door, and for all intents and purposes, he seemed to have a really sort of down-to-earth appraisal of what she brings to Beethoven and Mozart's and Schubert's Liz's lives, as they're staying there as sort of, she's their caregiver. So, I mean, and then at the same time, the other side of the coin, he flies off again by chopper, and he completely wreaks havoc on Beethoven and Mozart's respective musiques. The giant, chomping skull and the whole army of crazy penguins unleashed and all this stuff. It's insane, but it's absolutely intriguing, and I love that this classical music is at its foundation and is always interweaved throughout each episode, whether it's the music or not. But hearing that organ arrangement, Toccata and Fugue in D minor, it's, again, one of my favorite classical pieces, probably my favorite piece by Bach himself, and it's just another reason to love this series. I love it. And so yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Can't wait to see what we have in store in the next one. Catch y'all later. Peace.